The North American F-86 Sabre, sometimes called the Sabre jet, is a transonic jet fighter aircraft. Produced by the North American Aviation Corporation, the Sabre is best known as the United States' first swept-wing fighter that could counter the swept-wing Soviet MiG-15 in high-speed dogfights in the skies of the Korean War, fighting some of the earliest jet-to-jet battles in history. Considered one of the best and most important fighter aircraft in that war, the F-86 also rated highly in comparison with the fighters of other eras. Although it was developed in the late 1940s and was outdated by the end of the 1950s, the Sabre provided versatile and adaptable and continued as a frontline fighter in numerous air forces until the last active operational examples were retired by the Bolivian Air Force in 1994. Its success has led to an extended production run of more than 7,800 aircraft between 1949 and 1956 in the United States, Japan, and Italy. In addition, 738 carrier-modified versions were purchased by the United States Navy, and they were known as the FJ2s and 3s. Variants were built in Canada and Australia. The Canadian Sabre added another 1,815 airframes and the significantly redesigned CAC Sabre. It had a production run of 112. The Sabre is by far the most produced Western jet fighter, with a total production of all variants at 9,860 units. North American Aviation had produced the propeller-powered P-51 Mustang in World War II, which saw combat against some of the first operational jet fighters. By late 1944, North American proposed its first jet fighter to the U.S. Navy, which became the FJ-1 Fury. It was an unexceptional transitional jet fighter that had a straight wing derived from the P-51. Initial proposals to meet the United States Army Air Force's requirement for a medium-range, single-seat, high-altitude, jet-powered day escort fighter-bomber were drafted in mid-1944. In early 1945, North American Aviation submitted 4 designs. The U.S. Army Air Force selected one design over the others and granted North American a contract to build 3 examples of the XP-86. The leading specific requirements from the FJ-1 Fury, coupled with other modifications, allowed the XP-86 to be lighter and considerably faster than the Fury, with an estimated top speed of 582 miles per hour, versus the Fury's measly 547 miles per hour. Despite the gain in speed, early studies revealed the XP-86 would have the same performance as its rivals, the XP-80 and the XP-84. Because these rival designs were more advanced in their developed stages, it was feared that the XP-86 would be cancelled. Crucially, the XP-86 was not able to meet the required top speed of 600 miles per hour. North American had quickly devised a radical change that could leapfrog its rivals. The North American F-86 Sabre was the first American aircraft to take advantage of flight research data seized from German aerodynamicists at the end of World War II. These data showed a thin, swept wing could greatly reduce drag and delay compressibility problems that had bedeviled fighters such as the Lockheed P-38 Lightning when approaching the speed of sound. By 1944, German engineers and designers had established the benefits of swept wings based on experimental designs dating back to 1940. Study of the data showed that a swept wing could solve their airspeed problem, while a slat on the wing's leading edge that extended at low speeds would enhance low-speed stability. The Sabre's swept wings and jet engine produced a flying experience that was very different from the propeller-driven fighters of the time. The transition from props to jets was not without accidents and incidents, even for experienced fighter pilots. Early on in the jet stage, some U.S. manufacturers instituted safety and transition programs where experienced test and production pilots toured operational fighter squadrons to provide instruction and demonstration designed to lower the accident rate. Additionally, the ongoing technical development and long production history of the F-86 resulted in some significant differences in the handling and flying characteristics between the various F-86 models. Some of the important changes to the design included the switch from an elevator stabilizer to an all-flying tail, the discontinuation of leading edge slats for solid leading edge and increased internal fuel capability, increased engine power, and internal missile bay. The F-86D had the internal missile bay. Each of these design characteristics impacted the handling and flying characteristics of the F-86, not necessarily for the better. In the case of the solid leading edge and the increased internal fuel capacity, the design change produced increased combat performance. It also caused the dangerous and often fatal handling characteristic upon takeoff if the nose were raised prematurely from the runway. This over-rotation danger is now a major area of instruction and concern for current F-86 pilots. The 1972 Sacramento Canadair Sabre accident resulting in 22 fatalities and 28 other casualties was a result of over-rotation on takeoff. The F-86 entered service with the United States Air Force in 1949, joining the 1st Fighter Wing's 94th Fighter Squadron, and became the primary air-to-air jet fighter used by the Americans in the Korean War. While earlier straight-winged jets such as the F-80 and F-84 initially achieved air victories, when the swept-wing Soviet MiG-15 was introduced in November 1950, it outperformed all UN-based aircraft. In response, 3 squadrons of F-86 were rushed to the Far East in December. Early variants of the F-86 could not outturn, but they could outdive the MiG-15. Although the MiG-15 was superior to the early F-86 models in ceiling, acceleration, rate of climb, and zoom, with the introduction of the F-86 F in 1953, the two aircraft were more closely matched, with many combat experienced pilots claiming a marginal superiority for the F-86 F. The heavier firepower of the MiG and many other contemporary fighters was addressed by fielding 8-cannon armed F-86s in the waning months of the war. Despite being able to fire only 2 of the 4 20mm cannons at a time, the experiment was considered a success. The MiGs flown from bases in Manchuria by Chinese, North Korean, and Soviet VVS pilots were pitted against 2 squadrons of the 4th Fighter Interceptor Wing, forward-based K-14 Kimpo, Korea. In October 1951, the Soviets managed to recover a downed Sabre, and in their investigation of the type, they concluded that the Sabre's advantage in combat was due to the APG-30 gun sight that facilitated accurate fire at long ranges. Many of the American pilots were experienced World War II veterans, while the North Koreans and the Chinese lacked combat experience, thus accounting for much of the F-86's success. However, United Nations pilots suspected many of the MiG-15s were being flown by experienced Soviet pilots who also had combat experience in World War II. Former communist sources now acknowledge Soviet pilots initially flew the majority of MiG-15s that fought in Korea, and dispute that more MiG-15s than F-86s were shot down in air combat. Later in the war, North Korean and Chinese pilots increased the participation as combat flyers. The North Koreans and their allies periodically contested air superiority in MiG Alley, an area near the mouth of the Yalu River, the boundary between Korea and China, over which the most intense air-to-air combat took place. Although the F-86A could safely be flown through Mach 1, the F-86E's all-moving tail greatly improved maneuverability at high speeds. The MiG-15 could not safely exceed Mach 0.92, an important disadvantage in the near-sonic air combat. Far greater emphasis had been given to the training, aggressiveness, and experience of the F-86 pilots. American Sabre pilots were trained at Nellis, where the casualty rate of their training was so high, they were told, if you ever see the flag at full staff, take a picture. Despite rules of engagement to the contrary, F-86 units frequently initiated combat over MiG bases in the Manchurian Sanctuary. The needs of combat operation balanced against the need to maintain an adequate force structure in Western Europe, which led to the conversion of the 51st Fighter Interceptor Wing from the F-80 to the F-86 in December of 1951. Two fighter bomber wings, the 8th and the 18th, converted to the F-86 F in the spring of 1953. Number 2 Squadron, South African Air Force, also distinguished itself flying F-86s in Korea as part of the 18th FBW. The status of many claimed air-to-air victories in the Korean War has been increasingly debated as more data becomes available showing that instances of overclaiming abounded on both sides. By the end of hostilities, the F-86 pilots were credited with shooting down 792 MiGs for a loss of only 78 Sabres in air-to-air combat, a victory ratio of 10-1. Of the 41 American pilots who earned that designation of ace in the Korean War, all but one flew the F-86 Sabre, the exception being a Navy Vought F-4U Corsair night fighter pilot. However, after the war, the USAF reviewed its figures and an investigation codenamed Sabre Measure Charlie and downloaded the kill ratio of the North American F-86 Sabre against the Malkavian Gurich MiG-15, which I probably murdered the name, but either way, that was cut in half. Initially, the United States Air Force accepted that its pilots in fact downed more than 200 MiGs.
This aircraft's a lot of fun to fly. I haven't done anything other than fly it yet, but it's going to be quite an experience, I can say that already. Beautiful cockpit. I can't believe this thing's a classic. I mean, look at this. It's like so well put together. Oh, this is fun. Let's run the canyons with it. Very responsive. It gets a little less responsive at higher speeds, but after doing the intro and the research for it, I can understand why. This was one of the earlier models that doesn't have the all-moving tail, and the all-moving tail is what gave it all its maneuverability at higher speeds. This is one of the earlier models, so you can't really do that. So you have to really watch the speed when you're flying through the canyon, otherwise you might find a wall, and that's not going to be any fun. So just bringing the speed down to a decent percentage below Mach is going to make sure that you stay off the canyon walls. And, you know, for so much stuff in your way here, there's, you know, you can easily see everything. It's got a nice view. I like it. And the heads-up display here, it's pretty simplistic. It's just the gun sight. For everything else, you have to put your head down in the cockpit for. But hey, it's a classic. I'm not going to complain. This is great. And look at this, everything is analog. Check that out. Feels like you're flying a really advanced Cessna. For anybody that's new to this, I am in complete virtual reality, so it gives me the illusion that I'm actually inside this cockpit. And whatever you see is exactly what you're seeing through my eyes. So it's as if there's a camera attached to my head. I'm just looking at everything. Look at that throttle. Look at this cockpit in general. I mean, it looks like it's brand new. I love it. I feel like somebody just gave me the keys to a 1960s Mustang. It is extremely fun to fly. If somebody offered me one, I'd take it. And it's no F-16, but an F-16 is not a classic like this is. Handle's really smooth. Playing around with the clouds. I love this plane.
Something's gonna bring the change. Journeys we are meant to take. Something at the edge of space, calling us to fly away. In the dark of night,